Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. The process of excavating an ominous grave unleashes a long hidden secret and dreadful consequences buried underneath. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Exhuma. Well, Luke, we are back with another Shudder exclusive. So thank you to the folks over at Shudder for sending this over to us nice and early so we could check it out. I know there are tons of reviews out for this film already. Lots of people have gotten to see it at many festivals and other screenings over the last few months. So we're a little late to the party here, but this is going to be showing up as of when this video is posting tomorrow on Shudder, so you guys will all get a chance to check it out, and we are here to give you our thoughts. This is a pretty unique film. I only found out about this because of a collaboration I did with a buddy of ours, Chuck Your Movie Guy, over on TikTok, over on our buddy Alex's channel. Yeah, he was raving about this movie. So when it got picked up by Shudder and they said they were going to put it out, of course, I threw our hat in the ring. So Luke went into this, I gotta say, probably extremely cold. So Luke, how were you feeling about Exhuma after checking it out? And did you know anything about it before walking in?
Not too much. Never heard of it until you presented it to me. But I got to be honest, when they sent it over and you get that little synopsis, I realized this was a South Korean film, and I was instantly excited. There's a lot of great films that they produce. Train to Busan, Burning, not horror really. Parasite, all those are just absolutely great films. They're greatly paced. They just have an interesting concept. So as soon as I knew this was a South Korean film, I was interested in the approach because, it said supernatural, it had a bunch of different elements to it. So I was intrigued to see what they were really going to do with it. And I got to be honest, boy, am I glad that we got this screener because I really did enjoy this film. We just covered Handling the Undead, and it just kind of goes with foreign films in general. I think that approach is so unique, the pacing's so different, and they tend to linger in scenes longer than a lot of American films for the most part. So this one had all those great beats for me, and I found myself just enamored as I was watching this.
Yeah, I think that this film's strongest aspect isn't necessarily the horror. I think that it's there, but it really comes down to the human story, kind of the character, talking about lineage, talking about just like, your the kind of, what the consequences of our ancestors can kind of bestow upon us. Heritage and lineage is a huge thing in many Asian cultures, especially in South Korea. So it's one of those things where it's like, this is really harping on a lot of that, and I think that it does it in a very interesting way. One of the things that I really loved about this was just spending like the day after I finished it, just listening to lots of videos and reading lots of things about the kind of the folklore that they go over, and just kind of what these, not to spoil anything, spirits and things were that our characters interact with. And I thought that it was all very, very interesting, and I think there's so much deep lore and logic to this film, and that was instantly my favorite piece coming out of it.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with, this isn't like a straight up typical horror film. I think they were more interested in telling an actual story with those horror undertones rather than telling a particular horror story. Whereas sometimes for American films, we kind of get caught up in the jump scares and, either how gory something is or, how terrifying it can be. But, a lot of times with these foreign films, like we saw with Handling the Undead, they approach horror from a unique aspect where it is those undertones, but they're telling a longer narrative about our characters. And I think that is one of the most interesting aspects. A lot of character work, just kind of diving down that rabbit hole of, a shaman and the kind of how the energy works as we're kind of diving into that. I thought that was rather interesting. Us being an American audience and, having those elements that we're not really familiar with. And yes, I think the folklore that they bring here is rather interesting as well, where I think, an audience can watch this film and, find it, be rather pleased with it. But I think, after the credits roll, diving down that folklore and seeing really what they were presenting, although they don't deep dive into it, just those kind of aspects of the beats that they do hit, I think it's going to be rather interesting for an audience to really uncover a lot of the ground that they cover in this film, because this is a pretty dense film. It's over 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I'll say, for me, it didn't feel like 2 hours. We had a little bit of a time crunch to get this out, but I think that was the only thing that I paid attention to in terms of runtime. I think they cover so much ground in here, and then when they present an idea and you think that's going to be just the idea, they had another twist to it, and I thought that was rather interesting as well.
Yeah, no, this film did definitely, especially towards that third act, really start to introduce a lot of fun twists and a lot of things that I didn't necessarily see the story going. It felt like it was going to be a much subtler kind of, reveal and kind of situation. But as it builds, it does a really great job of building into something a little bit more extravagant, I should say. And I quite enjoyed everything that they presented with that. I will say that for me, at least, I felt the runtime a bit. I think especially once you get past the 2 hour mark, it did just kind of feel like we were getting towards a natural conclusion for me. And then it was like, okay, we're kind of still moving forward. We're kind of getting things going. I think they could have maybe shaved a little bit of time here and there. But again, saying that, I just don't know necessarily where to cut, because it is such a story-based and character-based film that I feel like maybe there are elements that I'm undervaluing maybe a little bit. So it could just be like a personal thing. But you guys know me. I like my shorter run times, especially with horror. I think the quicker the punch, the better. But this is definitely not one of those. This is very similar, like Luke's hitting it right on the head with handling the undead. I think like these two go kind of hand in hand with each other, so to say.
Yeah, and looking at this, I'm usually with you in terms of, hour and a half. We always talk about that sweet spot of getting in and out of a horror film. But again, this felt more like a thriller drama with horror undertones. So I think, all the character work and the time they spent, again, adding an extra twist to this, where you think you have one antagonist and then something else happens and it presents another idea, I thought was rather intriguing, because I wasn't prepared for that. I thought, going into this, you spend that first half hour and you're like, okay, we're setting up all the dominoes here and we're going to see them all fall. But then it adds another interesting element to it. And, antagonist wise, I thought it was, it really did work for me. Diving down a different realm of, I guess, supernatural, if we want to go that route with it. I don't want to give too much away, but, tackling that and kind of, like you said, lineage and how this all connects, and just that element of terror, because I think, toward the end of it, you do start, I can see people feeling that runtime, but I think that's when they kind of turn up the volume on those horror elements. So it captivated me a little bit, because I wasn't really sure if, again, I was hesitant going in seeing this was over 2 hours, but I think in terms of starting off strong with the character work, presenting ideas, and then turning up the volume on that horror toward the end of it really helped the runtime here kind of facilitate us getting through it and feeling satisfied, at least for me.
No, and I totally understand that. Again, I think it might have just been a personal preference. I did also, unfortunately, have to watch this really late at night, so maybe I was feeling a bit drained. But this is something I'm excited to revisit. I do plan on
Yes.
buying this because I think there's so much richness to this. And again, like you had named a ton of great South Korean horror films, and this is just another one that I think, again, not as deep of horror, but one that I definitely see myself revisiting, just again because I was so intrigued by the way they told their story. And there's just so many characters that it does really kind of, deserve a second watch, in my opinion. The standout for me, and I'll keep it very brief, and I know I'm going to butcher his name, but the great Choi Min Sink is just fantastic in this. Obviously, seasoned, film fans will know him from Old Boy. He plays our main character there. I Saw the Devil. So it's something that anytime that I see him in a project like this, it already sparks my interest. And admittedly, I didn't know he was in this until I started the film, and I saw him pop up, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is great. I'm so excited for this. So it's like any time he's on screen, I'm excited. He's definitely one of my favorite South Korean actors, and I absolutely adore anything that he's in. So big props to him.
And the ensemble cast was just absolutely great. Again, they're bringing these interesting aspects with like feng shui master, I think,
Mhm.
and shamans, things like that. It's things that we're not really familiar with here as Americans. And when they kind of present those ideas and establish that folklore that they really do dive into, I think it brings something unique and interesting to a film that we hardly ever see. At least being an American audience. I'm so glad this is going to be available on Shutter because I think a lot of people can really sit down and enjoy this one, especially with that over 2 hour runtime. You can kind of watch it at your leisure and then afterward dive into some folklore because I think you're gonna love this film that much more after you do see it. So for me, I'm excited to pick this one up as well. It's gonna look nice on the shelf with a bunch of other South Korean films that I do own. So for me, easy recommend for Exhuma.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be right there with you. This is definitely getting a recommend. I also compare this to another one, The Wailing. I don't know if you've seen it,
Yes.
Luke, but yeah, that's another great one. So it's like I think if you're a fan of The Wailing, it's not as I'd say intense, but it's definitely got the same tones, same energy. So yeah, I think that Exhuma is a big win, honestly, for Shutter, and a big win for us. I mean, we're just getting so spoiled with these wonderful foreign films that are just really taking the horror space and doing such interesting things with it right now. I highly recommend Exhuma. Again, I'm excited to honestly sit down and watch this one again. So I'm excited to talk about it with more people too. So alrighty. Other than that, I think that's going to wrap us up here, guys. Just a short one for you. We do get a lot of content on the channel already. Last week was a heavy week of reviews. And yeah, we have a ton on the way. We've been working pretty hard behind the scenes on some things other than reviews, all horror movie related, of course, that should be dripping out over the next week. So excited for y'all to see that. And yeah, it's going to wrap it up here. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.